All right, everyone. Welcome. This is SharePoint Power Hour. This is our show that we do live streaming every Wednesday at 11 Central. Power Hour is all about this in SharePoint, so that means nothing professional administration like that. This is basically all the topics that fall out of those two ranges. So that's pretty much everything else in SharePoint. We have a lot of different, we have about at least 35 different shows we've done already that are on our YouTube channel, SharePoint RAX YouTube channel, that you can go watch all the previously recorded ones. And we have basically our team here at Rackspace, we get together every week and we take turns doing demos and having discussions about different SharePoint technologies and things like that. Let's see, we have this week we're going to have Tavis talking about Power BI. As you're watching this video, hold on, it's playing in my browser over here. As you're watching this video, you can see that on YouTube there's actually a button that says to go to the Q&A. There's actually a little yellow icon that shows on your video that's playing. So there's actually a Q&A app that shows up over in Google, in your Google Hangout. So what you can do is you can ask questions in there and have a conversation going on, and we will answer your questions live as we're going, and then that way it's nice and interactive. And so that's sort of the bonus of watching these as we do them live, as opposed to watching them later when they're recorded, because you can interactively talk to us. And also, you know, feel free to shout out any ideas or questions about session ideas that you would like to have, or topics that we'd like to cover, or some kind of troubleshooting issue you'd like, you know, to maybe work through, or anything like that. So we'd love to have your feedback. But I'm going to go ahead and have everybody introduce themselves, Andy, and then Mike, and then Tavis can take it away.
I'm Andy Westendorf. I'm part of the Business Solutions team at Rackspace. I've been doing SharePoint consulting for 4 years, and I do BI through Excel, so this should be interesting.
Hi, I'm Mike Glisson, also on the Business Solutions team at Rackspace. Been working with SharePoint for about 10 years, and looking forward to Tavis's presentation today.
Is it all me?
All you.
All right. So since I'm presenting today, I went ahead and made up a super awesome slide that I can just share and tell you all about myself. Give me just a second here to share my screen. Get your last look at me.
Yeah.
I won't be seeing me the rest of this.
And your tagline is too long.
Oh, no.
Friendly neighborhood BI dev. It cuts off the last one.
It's not possible. Taglines can never be too long.
So, you guys seeing my screen? Should be the about me, who am I? Yes? No?
Yes, we can see it.
Sweet. Okay, so yeah, my name is Tavis Lovell, and I too am on the Business Solutions team, believe it or not. I'm based out of Cincinnati, and I've been doing consulting for about 8+ years, primarily with business intelligence. I've really been focused on that, and really focused on business intelligence inside of the Microsoft stack. So I really got into this whole thing through SQL Server, and then all the BI tools kind of started moving into SharePoint, at least the front-end tools. And now even some of the data modeling tools, I guess, with Power Pivot. So I kind of got, I wouldn't necessarily say dragged, but motivated into SharePoint. I've done some speaking and helped write a chapter in a book and have some certifications. You can see those there on the slide. I do have a blog out at tavislovell.com. One of the things we're going to be talking today is about data management gateways. And I just wrote a big long post that took me a very long time to write, and it is out there on my site. So if you find the way I present it to be somewhat confusing, you can maybe go and see if my writing is perhaps less confusing. I can't guarantee that. And then you can also find me on Twitter at Tavis. I check Twitter very, very rarely, but if you post something out there, I will eventually.
Tavis, I think your audio is acting up again. It might be your connection. It's all garbled.
Okay.
I think you said this happened last time.
1 second, and I'll try logging out and logging back in.
Okay.
Yeah. Give me just a second, and I'll be right back.
No problem.
Awesome.
I think I forgot to introduce myself anyway. So, I'm Laura Rogers. Let's see. I'm Laura. It just shows like a little icon.
Yeah, a little SharePoint. You're a talking circle right now.
Back. Okay. That's odd. I blame Google. We need to start using Link for these things, by the way. Anyway, I've been using SharePoint about 10 years, and my background is in server administration. I started out in 2004. I was an Exchange admin, and when SharePoint got introduced, they just kind of threw it at us and said, "Here, figure this out," and they sent us to some training. And Bill English happened to be the instructor for the class that I went to in Minneapolis. And that's how I met him. And he was starting to write his new Moss Administrator's Companion book and asking if anyone wanted to try book writing. And so I volunteered then and had to submit some just like some writing, just some other stuff to him so he could see if I was going to be okay at it. And wrote my first chapter in a book, which was the Moss Administrator's Companion for 2007. And then over the years, this is my long bio, by the way, while we're waiting for Tavis. Are you back, Tavis?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Are you ready to go back? I was just blabbing.
Yep. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hopefully it stays better. If it doesn't, let me know. I don't know what to do about the problems I've been having with Google Hangouts lately.
Got to get rid of that connection.
You might have to turn your video off or something like that, other stuff, just in case maybe that's hogging resources. I don't know. Go for it.
All right. Let's do it. So, moving on from who am I? We'll take a look at, I guess, the subject of this presentation, which is fun with Power BI for noobs. And I think that pretty much anybody who's working with Power BI is kind of a noob at it just because it hasn't been around very long. I know I certainly haven't done very much with it. And the main reason for that is that for quite a while you couldn't really connect to data that was on-premise. The only time you could connect to, the only data that you could connect to inside of Office 365 was data that existed in Office 365, and I think in some cases you could do some stuff with SQL Server Azure if you had that going on. But most people had their data, or have their data still on-premise and not somewhere in the cloud. So until there was some way to bridge that gap where I could report off of data that is on-premise at a client inside of Office 365, I just didn't really care too much about Office 365. But now you can do that to some extent, and I would imagine that it's only going to get better and better as time goes on. So as a kind of high level of what we're going to take a look at today, we're going to talk a little bit about data management gateways, and those allow you to basically connect your on-premise data with your Office 365 environment, and we'll see how you can refresh a workbook that has been uploaded into Office 365. And then once we get that taken care of, it's actually a little bit easier than you might think it would be. It's once you've done it once anyway. The first time took quite a while to figure out. The second thing we'll take a look at is the Power BI Q&A features inside of Office 365, which are pretty neat and pretty cool, so we'll take a look at those. So in a little bit more detailed agenda, I've created two Visio drawings. I'm no Visio Van Gogh, but I think they kind of help make it a little bit more clear how this data management gateway plays into everything. Then we're going to build a super simple Power Pivot workbook. Nothing fancy. I don't want this to become a Power Pivot Power Hour. But we do have to have something that is going to get refreshed. So we're just going to use the AdventureWorks database and create about the simplest report we could possibly create, just something so that we can prove our refreshing is working. After we do that, we'll go ahead and create the data management gateway and a data source in Power BI. So to do all the stuff that you see today, you're going to have Power BI enabled in your Office 365 environment. Then we're going to schedule a refresh of our workbook, and we'll see all that refresh happen right before our eyes, as it says on the slide. And then Power Query. So That's just kind of a more detailed agenda. So let's get to it. Let's take a look at these Visio drawings. So here's my first one. On the far left, we've got our Power Pivot workbook that is going to exist in Office 365. And then on the far right, we've got our on-premise database. So this is hosted locally at our business or whatever data center it is that we use. In my case, it's actually a virtual that's running in VMware. To get this refresh to happen between these 2 points, we'll create a data management gateway, and that really serves as like a tunnel between the Office 365 environment and the on-premise environment. And there's really 2 pieces to that. You have to set up a gateway in Office 365, and then you also have to download some software that gets installed on a computer inside of the on-premise network. Once that gateway is created, there's kind of some redundancy here. We also have to create a Power BI data source. So there's a data source that already exists inside of the Power Pivot workbook, but we have to create another one inside of Power BI. And the way these 2 are connected is it actually has to be the same connection string. It's how they get connected together, so it knows which data source to use, which is a little bit kludgy, I think. But I would suspect either some additional capabilities to eventually be added to the Power BI data source, or we no longer have to create it, one of the 2. But right now, you have to make it. So moving on to my second awesome Visio diagram. This is how things are going to kind of go down in my environment. We've got Office 365 again. We've got my computer, which is just a user computer that I'm using, and then we've got my database server, which hosts our AdventureWorks database that we're going to use. Now, you can install the gateway wherever you want to, as long as wherever you install that gateway software on your on-premise side, it has access to the database server. So you could install it right on the database server if you wanted to, or you could install it on your computer, which is what we're going to do in this case, just because that's the way I originally set it up. And the main thing to keep in mind is that whatever device you install the gateway software on, that device needs to be up and running at the time of the refresh. So you don't want to install it on somebody's computer who leaves every day at 5 and shuts down their computer for whatever reason, and then the refresh run at midnight and it's going to fail. The good news is whenever it does fail, it is very easy to set it up to send an email to you alerting you to that fact. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. And actually, I don't have a next slide, so the rest of this is me building stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at building a very simple Power Pivot workbook. To do that, I'll go ahead and go to Excel 2013. And from here, we are going to just create a blank workbook. Or try to anyway. There we go. And we're going to use Power Pivot. So we're going to go to the Power Pivot tab and click the Manage button, which is going to open up our Power Pivot management window. This is a separate window, but it's also inside of Excel. So if we go down here, we'll see that there is the Excel workbook window and the Power Pivot management window. We're going to connect to just a regular SQL Server database. So we'll go to From Database.
So Tavis, it's called Power BI, but you're actually Power BI, is that just like the way it's being presented in Office 365, and Power Pivot is what you're using as the tool to create it? Is that accurate?
Power BI is a set of features inside of Office 365.
Okay.
So that includes things like, I think you have to have that to get, I'm not real sure on the licensing and what exactly you get with Power BI. To do this refresh stuff, you have to have Power BI because it's all through the Power BI Admin Center. And then also to do things like the Q&A that we'll take a look at later, you also have to have Power BI.
Okay, so Power BI is more of something that you have to purchase and have, like, from a licensing perspective, but you're still using Excel and Power Pivot to actually do what you're doing to create your BI solution? So.
Yes.
Okay.
So that could be either an actual licensed version of Office that you've installed on your machine, or you could use like the Office 365 license for Office, one of the two. And in fact, some of the features are only enabled when you're using the Office 365 version of Office, which we will talk a little bit later on when we get to the Power Q&A stuff. Okay. So we were going to import some data. I'm just going to type in my server name here, which is literally just SQL, and then we'll pick a database name, which is AdventureWorks DW 2012. The important step here is we want to click on Advanced, and we want to grab this connection string. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, the connection string between this data source in our workbook and the data source that we create inside of Office 365 need to be the exact same string. So I'm just going to highlight this, copy it, and throw it into Notepad here for a second, and we'll get back to that later. We can go ahead and test the connection if you want. It looks like it works. Click OK. Click OK back out, and click Next. The wizard asks you if you want to just select from a list of tables or if you want to write a specific query. We're just going to select from a list. And we're going to import, like I said, really just a very small, simple amount of data so we can prove that this refresh is working. So I'm going to pick a dim product category, and then we can even apply some filters to it. So maybe we just want the category ID and the English product category name. Click OK. Click Finish. And click Close. And there we can see our data. And there are 5 values: bikes, components, clothing, accessories, and the refresh worked. So we're going to have to add a second the refresh worked in order to know if the refresh worked. This first one is going to be false. So we'll go ahead and click the... Well, let me back up for a second. If you have an existing workbook and you wanted to see what that connection string was, all you need to do is open up your Power Pivot Management window, go to Existing Connections, and it should show your different connections here, whichever one you want to see the information for. Click on it, hit Edit, and then you can go to Advanced, and right there is your connection string again. Okay, we're going to create just a simple pivot table in Excel using this data. So let's go ahead and hit the drop down and select Pivot Table. We'll put it in the existing worksheet. We'll click OK. And then we're just going to select from the right-hand side Pivot Table fields product category name. So we've got our 5 values there. We'll go ahead and save this workbook. And I'm going to save it to my desktop. And I'll save it as Power Hour Example. Okay, and then we can go ahead and minimize this stuff. The next thing we want to do is upload this to Office 365. So if we open up our browser, I conveniently already have Office 365 open here. If we navigate to our Power BI environment, we can do that by going to Site Contents. There's actually a link for it right here, but if you didn't have that link, you could go to Site Contents, and then under the apps here, there should be a Power BI, and it will be the green one. So you can click on that guy, and at the moment there is absolutely nothing uploaded to this environment. So it's completely blank. We can add our document by clicking on Add, Upload File, select it from our desktop, click OK.
Tavis, can you kind of walk us through what that whole interface is on the screen there that you're looking at with what all the different parts of that page are? Because that's brand new to most everybody. Is it just some kind of like out-of-the-box dashboard it gives you to?
Yeah, we'll get to that when we get to the Power Q&A stuff. Let me put that question on ice for just a little bit here. Right now, all we want to do is upload this workbook. And then we'll take a look at the features of adding featured reports and using the Power Q&A and all that stuff after we get this refresh cooking. So now that we've got our workbook here, let's configure it so it can be refreshed with the on-premise data. So we're going to go back, and we're going to need to go to admin. So you're going to have admin rights. And you should have a Power BI admin if you have Power BI enabled in your environment. We're going to go ahead and click on this guy. And then the two things we're really interested in, other than reading all of this getting started material, is gateways and data sources. So as we mentioned previously, the first thing we need to create is really a gateway. To do that, you will just simply select the plus sign by the new gateway. Give it a name. We'll call it Power Hour Gateway. And you can give it a description if you want. I haven't tried using this cloud credential store yet. For this example, we're going to leave it unchecked, but that is something I'm going to have to get into here shortly and try and figure out. We're going to go ahead and click Create. Now, if this is your first time creating a gateway, you're going to need to go and download and install this software. If you click the download button, it'll take you right to the download page. And you would click download and run through the installation wizard. In my case, I have already installed the software, so we're not going to actually download it. The second piece to it is that you'll need to copy this key, and this key basically allows these two pieces of the gateway to talk to each other. So we've got a key on the Office 365 side and then a key in the software that we download. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish here. And you can see right now the gateway is stopped. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen sharing real quick because I don't want to, not that you guys are all ne'er-do-wells who are watching right now, but I don't want you guys to have a path into my environment if you were trying to do this at home. So I'm going to regenerate it to you real quick.
I'm going to try and hack in.
Too late. I'd already thought of that.
Anybody have questions while we're stopping for a second? Just let us know. Put them in the Q&A.
Okay. I should be ready to go again. Can you guys see my screen again?
Almost.
Yes, I can.
Okay, good deal. So if for any reason you needed to regenerate a key, the way you do that is you just click on the ellipsis next to the gateway, and you can simply hit regenerate, and it will give you a new key, and you can copy and paste it, which I have already done.
I can't see your screen anymore.
Okay. Can nobody see my screen?
I can see it, except when I talk, then I'm on the screen, but I can see it when you're talking.
Okay, now I can see it again, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to assume that everybody sees my screen. So now we need to do the second piece. We've got our gateway created in Office 365. You will have downloaded that software that we saw on the previous page, and you need to run through a couple of things there. Since I already have it downloaded, I'm just going to type in Data Management Gateway. There it is. And there's really only two buttons in here, Register Gateway and Stop Service. So I'm going to hit Register Gateway. I'm going to paste in that key that I had copied, and then click OK. And it's going to try and register stuff.
We have a question. Can you use Power BI off a SharePoint list?
I mean, you could use like Power Query. Yeah, I'm not.
Well, I mean, if you go to SharePoint list and then export it to Excel, that creates a query file. Can you use that as a
data source? I'd imagine yes, you could, but you wouldn't need to do any of this stuff to do that.
Yeah.
So hopefully that somewhat answers your question. So it says declined here. One of the things I've noticed is after you register a new gateway, since there was already one registered, I usually have to go in here and stop the service and then restart the service. I don't know if that is by design or if that's just the way things work, but it seems to usually fix the problem for me. So you can see we've kind of got two indicators. It's saying disconnected right now. The service is stopped. I hit start. It's starting. They both say stopped. We'll just have to give it a minute here. It should start to say connecting. So now it's connecting. And it's picked up the name of the service, Power Hour Gateway, so I know that something's going right here. And this usually doesn't take more than a minute to fully connect. And we should see both of these say connected, and then this one should go to green over here. There it is, running. Yay! It still says connecting over here, but I'm going to assume that it actually has connected if this is saying running. We'll leave it open and we'll come back to it. Ah, there we go. No, we won't come back to it because now they both say that they're running. So yeah, it takes some finagling there, and it does take a little bit to actually sync up. But our gateway should be up and running. The next thing we want to do is create our data source. So over in Data Sources, inside of the Power BI Admin Center, we'll click on Data Sources. Click the plus sign next to New Data Source. And there are a couple of options here. This one kind of caused me some problems at the beginning because I had read about how you could sync data via Power Query, which I'm not really familiar with. I haven't done a ton with Power Query. And using OData. And apparently this rolled out not completely working the first time. It may have been updated since then, but I had a big, long forum post with people talking from people with Microsoft, and the end result was that didn't work, at least at that point in time. And that was a couple of weeks ago, so it may work now. I don't know. You never know how the update cycle works with Office 365. But SQL Server and Oracle do work, so we're going to use SQL Server in our example here. And you really only need to enable the OData feed for the Power Query stuff, so we're going to go ahead and leave that unchecked. We're just going to have enable cloud access checked. Click next and name our data source, which is going to be Tavis test data source, I guess. Tavis test DS, that looks fine. You can add a description if you want to. You'll want to select the gateway. So you could have multiple gateways potentially. We're going to use the Power Hour gateway, the one we just created. For our data source type, we're going to keep it as SQL Server. And then here is another place that really confused me because I thought I could just type in the name of the server and the name of the database and then set the credentials. And apparently that didn't work very well either when I was originally learning this stuff. What you need to do is actually click connection string. And then we need to paste in that connection string that we copied earlier. So I'll bring that guy back up, paste it in here. And once you paste that in there, it tries to reach it and wants you to set credentials. So this would be like a service account that has read-only access typically to whatever data source you're trying to connect to. When you hit credentials, it brings up a new little window here. That usually takes a second for it to open up. So as you can see, it's not exactly 100% baked so far. You kind of got to do some finagling to get this to work. But I mean, as you would imagine, this is only going to get easier and easier to do. And just as a first kind of outing for this stuff, I'm super excited about it. So you can pick what credential type you want to use. We're going to use a Windows account. And remember, this is a Windows account that's in my actual on-premise environment. So Toso /administrator. Obviously, you would never want to use administrator in a real-life environment, but this is just my dev environment. Go ahead and test the connection. It says it was successful, so we can click OK. And then we can go ahead and click Next. This is also my dev Power, or my dev Office 365 environment, so I'm literally the only user in here. If I had other users that I wanted to allow to use this data source, I would add them here, users or groups, I suppose, by clicking the plus button and adding them accordingly. We're just going to leave it as just me who has access and click Finish.
Hey, Tavis, Stacy says she missed the very beginning. Are you connecting to a SQL Server on-prem through this gateway?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, thanks.
It is a database that is literally a virtual machine running in my environment. So not in the cloud. Yes. So now that we've got our gateway and our data source created, what's left to do is schedule the refresh for the workbook. So we'll go back to our Power BI site where we uploaded that workbook to. And remember there were the 5 values here, right? So it already has one that says the refresh worked, even though that was just in there for me testing this out earlier. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and crack open this database and add a second the refresh worked, just so when this refreshes, we'll actually be able to see that it did indeed work. So I'm going to open up SQL Server Management Studio real quick. And this is on my on-premise environment. We'll go to AdventureWorks, Tables, product category is what we were using. So we'll edit top 200 rows, and we'll add power hour refresh, all in camel case. And go ahead and paste that through here. All right, when the data refreshes, we should see this new value, power hour refresh, in our workbook. So back in Power BI. And this has to be done in the Power BI section, because this document really lives just in the Documents library in regular Office 365, but you will not get the same options when you click the ellipsis for the workbook from the regular Documents library as you will when you do it inside of the Power BI app. So we'll click the ellipsis and we'll see that there is a scheduled data refresh. Click OK, or click refresh, I guess. And then to enable it, all you really need to do is double-click the toggle here. That will turn it on. There is a section for picking. Your workbook could have multiple data sources inside of it, right? This one only had one. If you had multiple data sources, you would obviously want to set up multiple Power BI data sources for any of them that you wanted to refresh. Some of them you might not care if they refresh, I don't know. But anyone you want to refresh needs to have a check next to it, and that corresponding Power BI data source created. Some options to configure the refresh schedule. Right now it looks like, out of the box anyway, I think daily is the most frequent that you can have your data refresh. It seems like maybe I saw that there were some workarounds with that, using some workflows and some trickery to make that happen more often. But out of the box anyway, it's just daily. And then you can set an email for notifications if it fails to refresh, which in my case I set it to my Gmail account a while ago, and my virtual machines, I wasn't using them for a few days, so every day they couldn't find the gateway and would email me about it, which was awesome. So everything is good here. We're just going to go ahead and hit Save and Refresh Report. So not only is it going to schedule the refresh, but it's also going to actually execute on the refresh. So we'll click this button. It comes back with Refresh Report Now. This is kind of counterintuitive because I immediately want to say, well, yeah, I wanted to refresh it now. And then you click it, and it will tell you that the refresh is already running because it kicked it off actually the first time you hit the button. But if you wanted to manually kick it off at any time, you could come in here and do this, or hit this button again. To view the history of the refresh, there is a history link up here at the top. So if we go over to history, we can see, and this is even new just recently, it used to not come up with a blue bar until something had actually completed. And now it seems to come up with the blue bar and an event entry right off the bat that says it is trying to refresh. And I think this one usually takes about 40 or so seconds. I had a workbook that was pretty big that I'm not using for the demo that had, I don't know, it was about 5 megs, so it had, 60,000 rows, I think, in one table. And still, that only took about, even from my horrible, horrible connection for uploads, it only took about a minute and a half, I think. So it's pretty fast. I have noticed that this doesn't exactly refresh all the time. Sometimes it'll stick here for a long time, the event status. So I usually just go ahead and click refresh once or twice to see if it has completed, and indeed it already has. So we've got a status of success. We can click the little plus button here, and it'll show us which data sources were refreshed in the workbook, along with their status. So now, if we go back to our data source, or our workbook, sorry. Looks like I went too far back. We should see that power hour refresh now in our workbook. The refresh worked, and power hour refresh. So we have indeed refreshed. Yay! And that's how you refresh a workbook with on-prem data. That's me singing. So this that's pretty much it for the refreshing data using data management gateways when the data is on-prem. Powerful, powerful stuff that I expect to only get better and better. So in my mind, Office 365 didn't really become a viable means of servicing business intelligence for an organization until you start to be able to do stuff like this. So now I think it's going to become a major contender and only get better and better as time goes on and they release new updates. So,
any other questions from anybody? You can use the Q&A. So as far as this is what, like, when you go to sign up for Power BI, if you have Office 365, it's like, what, $40 per user for license?
Yeah, I believe so.
As of right now.
The last time I checked, actually what we're reviewing here is just me on the trial, so it could expire at any minute. I know it is already, it seems like it already gave me warning notifications, but then it said I still had a few more days or something like that, so I don't know. But it's still running. But it is $40 a person, last I checked.
Well, it's good because people who are used to Excel, used to using Excel, it's a familiar tool that you're using for just in general, right?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of stuff. If you want to refresh stuff and be able to show users that this stuff is working. So, I mean, this document is housed out in just the documents library, right? So I don't think you'd have to have the Power BI license for that person. And again, I don't really know much about this licensing. This is all pretty new to me. But I'm fairly certain that they should just be able to go to the documents library and view the Excel services report without any problem. And it's the refresh, the person who's coming in here and configuring the refresh.
Yeah.
Now, don't quote me on that, but I think that's how it works.
Yeah, my issue with multi-tenant has been the refresh part of it, not actually creating any of the dashboards themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know you need a license for everyone for Power BI, maybe only a select few. But
so what's the equivalent on premises? You would be able to just use the secure store to be able to create authentication, to be able to just pass to use that authentication inside of Excel. Well, on premises you'd have to have the enterprise version of SQL, right, to have Power Pivot running on the server?
You would have to have that for Power Pivot, but you wouldn't necessarily have to use Power Pivot. You could just use regular Excel. There's no really equivalent because the problem doesn't exist with on-premise.
Right, because you create an account that will run the refresh for you.
Right, and that could either be the default unattended account that is associated with the service application, or it could be, an unattended account in the secure store that you specifically wanted to use via the ID, whatever it's called, that ID that it gives you in the secure store. But I mean, you're all in the same network. You don't have the same problem. The scenario here is that you've got your SharePoint in the cloud and your data on premise, and that's what I'm showing how to solve here, at least somewhat.
Okay, so we have a question. Carlos says, who needs a Power BI license? Just the user setting up gateways or anyone opening the spreadsheet?
Yeah, and that's, like I said, this
is all
pretty...
anyone opening the spreadsheet, right?
I think it's only the person, we don't know, I think is the takeaway.
We're not the licensing experts, but
right.
when you go to sign up for Power BI and put it in there as part of your Office 365 account, it's $40 per user. I assume it's going to say however many users you have for Office 365, that's what it's going to charge you for your users of Power BI, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, and maybe we can do some more investigation and figure that stuff out. But I mean, at the moment, I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around capabilities. And in terms of licensing, I don't even know how.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's kind of like how, if you want to customize a form with InfoPath, you need to have one person that does the customization. They have InfoPath, but the other users, if you're they don't have to have InfoPath. You know what I mean? So like you have one person.
Form, so you still have to have the enterprise license of SharePoint, and that's where the license comes in for that one.
Right. So anything that you would need to do, again, this is assumption, but anything that you would need to do from that Power BI app. So when you came into that, that green icon on the app section, you would need the license for. But I'm pretty sure, or I would think, I'm not pretty sure. I would think though that if you just a regular user went to just the Documents library and opened up the workbook, that they would not need the Power BI. And like I said, all the menu options in here are totally different. You don't have any of the like schedule refresh or add to Q&A or add to favorites and all that stuff that you have in the Power BI section. And you can see that obviously the refresh has taken effect on the entire workbook because we see our thing here. So not just in the Power BI environment.
So Howard says, does the app you installed need to stay open on the computer, or will it run in the background as a service?
No, no, it runs as a service. I can close this anytime. It does not need to stay open. But the service does need to stay running, which means the computer needs to stay on, obviously. So that is something to keep in mind. So let's maybe take a look at some of the Q&A stuff, and maybe just like Laura said a little bit earlier, just some of the Power BI screen here. So this looks a little weird at first. I was like, what's going on? You've got your featured reports at the top. Every additional document library seems to add a new section down here as well. So if I had additional document libraries, you would see them below. If you wanted to add this report as a featured report, I would imagine you might want to start featuring reports if you had a ton of them. I, in this case, only have one. So we'll go ahead and make it you just click on the ellipsis and say add to featured reports, and it does that in pretty short order, as you can see. If I wanted to get rid of it as a featured report, I could click on either location and just say remove from featured reports. The Q&A stuff that we want to take a look at. So if we go to the ellipsis here, and in order to make the data in a workbook available to the Q&A piece, you have to click Add to Q&A for the workbook. So we'll click that. It's going to say Add it to Q&A. And then to use the Q&A piece, there is a link over here at the top right that says Ask with Power BI Q&A. And I would be flabbergasted if you didn't have to have the Power BI license for the user to use this. But you click on this link, and you basically just get a text box. And you can start typing questions into this text box, and it will give you answers based on the data that it has available. So I could say, like, count of categories. I mean, we didn't have much data in our workbook, right? All we had was a list of categories. So I could say count of categories and hit enter. I think I hit enter. There it goes. It's just taking a minute. And it's showing that, hey, there are count of dim product categories equals 6. So that's kind of cool. So I could say, all right, what are the distinct, we could say show all categories. And it's going to show me a list of all the categories, and it just picked that out of the workbook. Now I will say that, and we're going to take a look at this on a more grand scale here in a second, because this is all the data we have, literally. We're looking at it right now in our workbook. What I will say is, to get this to work with bigger workbooks, it does take some effort inside of the data model. You want to make sure your data types are correct, that you have the way things summarize correct. You want to make sure the relationships play a very big part on what data gets returned. So you want to really have your data modeling down. Also, there's a thing called synonyms that allow you to make, well, it's basically like a synonym, what a synonym is. So another word for whatever it is they're querying. So maybe if they called categories something else commonly, you would create a synonym for English product category that is whatever they commonly call it. I don't know what that would be. So let's take a look at this on a more grand scale, because this is just a very small workbook. So I do have a, I set up another Power BI site that had some demo data. And all the sites, when you first open them, have the option to create or load it with some example data that Microsoft has. What the heck? That's the wrong link. That's the link to get into Power Hour. Close that. Give me just a second here. Okay. All right. And this is still in my Office 365 environment. It's just a subsite. And we'll go into Power BI in here, and you'll see all the example data. So there's some data about the Olympics, which is what I think we're going to use, just because I think everybody at least understands a little bit about gold, silver, and bronze medals. And then there's some World Bank indicators that have some data in it as well, but I haven't really used any of that. So let's take a look at this. These are both enabled for Q&A already. So it says remove from Q&A. If you ever wanted to remove it from Q&A, this is where you do it. But we'll go to Ask with Power BI again. And you'll see in this scenario, it already has a whole bunch of what are called featured questions. And we'll take a look at how to add these later, but I can basically click on it, and it's going to take me to the data that this question is, that relates to this question. Let's start typing our own question. So let's start off with count of Olympic medals. And we click that, and it's going to show us all the medals that it's found. And it even shows us which workbook it found it in. It found it in the Olympics sample.xlsx. So we can go ahead and start to refine this some more. This is actually all rendered in Power View, I should also mention. So if we say, all right, count of Olympic medals, maybe by athlete. And we can see that it goes ahead and throws it into a nice little chart here. Not surprisingly, we see Michael Phelps at the top with
That
22.
is so cool, by the way.
Yeah, pretty neat, pretty neat. So you can refine it further if you wanted to. So Michael Phelps has 22 right now. We know he has the most. We could say where year equals or is 2012. And it's going to go ahead and requery that. So we see in 2012 he actually earned 6 medals. And then we could refine it even further. We could say maybe put some limits on it, where year is 2012 and medal count is greater than I don't know, 3. So we can see that those are the people who won more than 3 medals. You can also do like betweens in here as well. So you don't. I mean, you're gonna have to play around with it a little bit. I still have been playing around with it. The syntax doesn't have to be exact. I mean, there is no syntax. You just start typing what you think. But you want to kind of phrase it like you would a SQL query. So you kind of want a where somewhere, and the concept of greater than or between or less than. So you don't type it. It's not as picky about syntax, but it does take some playing around with. I've typed in some stuff that I thought would work that didn't quite work. Where medal count is, so we said where medal count is greater than 3. We could even say where medal count is between maybe 4 and 5. That's weird. Count of medals by athlete, where year is 2012 and medal count is. Maybe is this throwing it off? I don't know.
You
Maybe
put
those are.
between than 4 and 5.
Oh. There you go. See? Even I can mess it up. But yeah, obviously we don't see Michael Phelps at the top now. So I mean, it's easy. People are going to mess it up without a doubt. That's a lot of text, right? We've got a lot of conditions. Another cool thing is, since this is Power View, if you start to do things with like geographic data, so count of Olympic medals by, instead of athlete, we could say by country, and we click that, it's going to take us to a map. It wants me to enable the maps, and voila, there you go. So you can actually get rid of all this stuff, count of Olympic medals by country. We'll take off all the filters, and we'll see a lot more data points. So pretty cool, I thought. I wanted to try and show you one more thing here. We'll say, let's go back to count of Olympic medals. By athlete. Well, I thought I hit enter. I didn't want this on the map still. I don't know why it's showing the map. Count of, see, that's the problem. There's not a lot of options to pick from. Sometimes you wonder why it's doing one thing over the other. Let's say count of medals by athlete. You're making me angry. Let's try and go back.
They put an announcement on the Power BI blog today. They announced some like new features that it has now and things that are bug fixes, by the way. So blogs.msdn.com/b/PowerBI is where you guys can find that. Just let you get back to what you're doing.
TH. Okay, there's where I wanted to get back to. So the other thing I wanted to show you is explore results window over here, or explore this result. It's got to show, I mean, you can change it to different, it usually does its best guess on what the data should look like. I mean, we could change this to like a pie chart if we wanted to. I don't know how useful that's going to be. But I mean, you can kind of flip through this and see what the different options look like. You can see the filters that it has applied. So at the moment, it's just where the medals is greater than 0. But if we started doing where statements, you'd see additional things pop up in here. And then in the fields, you can actually see all the different tables inside of the Power Pivot workbook that it's selected, and even which columns it went ahead and picked. And you can do a little bit of adding stuff in here, although when I've started to play around with this, things start to get weird. Also, when you retype a query, I noticed that things even start to get weirder, and I had to go back and kind of refresh and start from the beginning again. So my takeaway is that this is a good way to locate initially where some information is, but probably still needs a little bit of refining. I mean, it's pretty amazing what it does right now, but as someone who knows query languages pretty well, I'd probably just refer to that. But what you can do in here, like class, I thought this was pretty interesting. So if you went to add as tile by here for class, we can see gold, silver, and bronze going across the top. And I don't know, maybe you guys know that Michael Phelps is the all-time gold medal winner, but do you know who the all-time bronze medal winner is?
You tell us.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but this can. It is Alexia Nemov. And I don't know what she won it for, and we probably have to do some further querying to figure that out. But pretty cool, I thought. And then the all-time silver medalist is Yeah, Alexander Ditjetten or something like that with 6. So I thought that was kind of cool. For the featured question thing we saw at the beginning, where before we even had typed any questions in, there were just all these guys. You can add those fairly easy by clicking either the plus sign here, or if you had a query in there already, you can go to About This Data over on the right-hand side and click Add Featured Question. Either one is the same thing. And you would type your query in here. So I don't know, maybe most metals by metal type. Click Show on the Power BI site homepage. And you can have a large icon or a small icon, whatever you pick. Pick your color. You can pick a background icon or an image if you have one hosted somewhere. And then hit Save. And that will add it to your list of featured questions. And then to use that, a user would just click on it, and it will show them the results of that data. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting. Most metals by metal type, and somehow more bronze metals got awarded than any other type of metal, which makes no sense to me. You'd think that they would be all equal, but I don't know.
Ties, I think.
I guess that could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Does everybody get a medal? See, I don't usually watch the Olympics.
Well, I think if they tie for third, then they both receive it, which would mean, like, for gold and silver, you would have the same amount, because then there'd be less of the other ones. But
I wonder if they actually are the same. It looks like maybe 5040, 5072. So there's slightly more silvers.
yeah, so like I would think that means that like 32 times somebody tied for gold, and so there wasn't a silver medal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so like 2 tied for first, and then there wasn't a silver, so then they went to bronze.
Cool.
Maybe.
Cool, we got a couple more minutes left. Anybody else have any more questions they want to throw in there?
Yeah, because I think I'm just about done with what I was going to show. Other than to take these away, I mean, you can go back over here and you can either edit it or just delete it. But I mean, I think the main takeaway, unless we have any questions, is that you know, you could actually start showing BI in Office 365 with your on-premise data now and have it refresh and all that good stuff, which is really, really cool. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen, I guess, so everyone can see my gorgeous face.
All right. So next week's topic, again, same time, same place. I'm going to be doing a demo of an HR onboarding process that I created. It's just like an example of a fairly complex workflow and dashboard for employees being onboarded. I mentioned this at SP TechCon. I did some of it, and then at in a couple of different sessions, and then also in my workflow session at SP24, I mentioned parts of it, and then people just kind of wanted to see more of it, you know, that they requested. So that's kind of per those people's requests. I'm going to go ahead and demo it for Power Hour, so it's going to be pretty advanced stuff. Not using any out-of-the-box workflows or anything like that. I'll just custom, not programming, but custom SharePoint Designer workflows. And SP24, by the way, SP24conf.com is going to do a rewind. So they're going to play the whole conference over again. It was a 24-hour virtual conference. So you can go to that website and watch it again. It's going to be on the 14th and 15th. So that's next week, I think.
Yep.
Is that right, Andy? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I just blogged about that just a couple days ago, wonderlar.com. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody here next week. Let's see if there's any other questions. Oh, Stacey said she's working on an HR onboarding right now. All right, we'll see everybody next time. Bye.
Adios.
Sure.